Hey, welcome back to the Metropole Grid. My name is Andre. Thanks so much for tuning in. Just this last Thursday, it was a big day for Android Netrunner. This was the release of Terminal Directive, the new expansion for Android Netrunner. Now, this expansion is actually very different than all the expansions that came before it, because if you notice here on the text, this is a campaign expansion. All the other expansions were deluxe expansions, if you're not familiar, and they were just basically a collection of cards that were immediately integratable into the Android Netrunner experience on Tournament Play or wherever you wanted to play. This is actually very different because this comes with a two-player story. It's also a legacy game, and the idea is that you sit down with one opponent and you play, like, I don't know how many games it is, maybe 15 or so games, and a story unravels. There's a lot of like these legacy elements, these elements that will affect your story in mysterious ways that are not apparent to you. And hopefully at the end of the day, you're going to have an interesting experience that is totally different than anybody else's experience based on the actions that you took and how your game's unraveled. If you want to get a basic idea of what legacy games are, you probably want to look up Pandemic Legacy, which has kind of been the gold standard. But this just came out, and it comes out with 86 corporation cards, 77 runner cards for 4 of the factions. I'm really excited to play this campaign. I haven't got to it yet. I'm actually starting my campaign tomorrow evening on a Monday at the Randolph Pub, so I'm not actually going to be talking about any of that today. Today, this is going to be more like the unboxings you've seen, probably, or hopefully, on the, what are they called, on the data packs. So we have about 100 and something cards, almost 200 cards that came out that are tournament legal immediately for 4 factions. You got your Criminal, you have your Shaper, you have Wayland, and you have HB. And so these cards, there's not going to be any spoilers about the campaign, nothing like that. These are just cards that come in the pack that says open now right away, and they're immediately tournament legal, so I wanted to talk a bit about them and just kind of discuss it, because this is a lot of new cards at once, so that's really exciting. The way I'm going to break this up, if you're new to this thing, if you want to see only, or you want to hear about only specific cards, do not hesitate. There's timestamps in the description below, so jump around if you want. But we're going to start with the criminal cards. There's like 11 or so, and we're going to do some neutral cards too. A lot of cards to go through. I know I generally go on the long side. I love talking about the cards and the design of this game. So we're going to separate this. I think the first video is going to be Criminal, and then we'll do Shaper next one, and so on and so on. But without further ado, let's begin. Actually, yeah, again, for a bit of further ado, there's not official scans yet, or sorry, official images on Netrunner DB, so we're going to be working off of these high quality scans. So this is just a bit different. All right, and what a good place to start with Steve Cambridge. This is your criminal identity. There's only one identity for each faction, so this is your criminal. Steve is a master grifter. He's also a Gmod, and he has 0 link, 45, 15. So 45 deck size, 15 influence, incredibly standard. But he has a really cool ability. The first time each turn that you make a successful run on HQ, you may choose 2 cards in your heap, if able. Now the corp removes one of those from the game, and the other is added to your grip. It's recursion in Criminal, which is something that if you asked me before Steve Cambridge was spoiled or revealed, would there ever be recursion in Criminal? And it always seemed like a straight answer. It was always going to be no. And the reason why is that Criminal has some really powerful events. One of the biggest one is Account Siphon, which has had an incredibly strong impact on Netrunner at almost all levels. And the idea is that after you play Account Siphon, if you had a recursion card in Criminal, you could bring that Account Siphon back and play a second Account Siphon, which is one of the best things you can do after playing one Account Siphon. And people were really worried about that, but regardless, we have Criminal recursion in the form of Steve Cambridge, and let me tell you, I'm actually really excited for that. So Steve Cambridge is recursion, but it's very limited recursion, and more importantly, it's recursion that requires interaction and decision-making, intelligent decision-making between both sides, the runner and the corporation. So the idea is that Steve Cambridge, once you have at least 2 cards in your heap, you can run HQ, pick 2 cards, and that's an interesting choice, right? You got to choose 2 cards, and then you want to make this decision difficult or at least interesting, because the corp is going to look at one of them and say, nah, remove it from the game, mind you, so it's now out of the pool of cards that you could possibly recur with Steve, and then give you the other one. And that's awesome, and that's why a big reason why I don't think this is going to become degenerate account siphon spam, because if as long as you're not showing 2 account siphons, the corp can always choose the other one, the other card that you've picked, and that's really cool. So like, deck building aside, and like even talking about the really cool things you can do with Steve Cambridge, if you just put this in a vanilla Criminal deck that runs just good stuff, and you get this ability to fire a couple times, It's a really good ability. Just talking about like the good stuff you have in your deck, if you can run HQ, which is a good thing to be doing anyways, you'll get accesses, you can get a lot of things alongside that. But also not instead of accessing, on top of accessing, you get a pullback one, even if it's the most like generic vanilla card in your deck. You basically get a free click where you get to put that on top of your deck and you also get to draw it. So it's a clickless draw and it's a clickless tutor for running HQ. That's fantastic. Like the idea is if you run HQ and you see your choices, the corpse choices between an account siphon and a sure gamble, even if you get the sure gamble back, which is obviously not as good as account siphon, you didn't spend a click drawing that sure gamble and you didn't spend a click, like it just clickless sure gamble shows up in your grip, and that should be obvious how good that is. And it's not just sure gamble. There's so many cards, like just standard vanilla criminal cards, even neutral cards that you put in your deck, that getting them back at almost no cost is phenomenal. If you're getting back your daily cast, that's great. Your councilmen, your Earthrise hotels, your career fairs. There's just your daily cast, your dirty laundries. There's just so many things that if you can run HQ and just get them back into your hand, that's really good. That's just going to be fantastic. And that's not even considering all the cool things you can do with Steve. Now, it's very important to understand the timing of this. This ability fires when the run is successful. So that will fire before you access any cards from HQ, and that's also very important because that impacts both the runners and the corporation's choice and what they want to recur. If you, maybe you access HQ and then you see that they have Scorched Earth, now you want to consider bringing back like Sports Hopper or whatever. And sure, the corp can make sure that you don't get them back. But the idea is that you're going into this with less information about your decision than after you access HQ. And that's very important to understand. So even just like bringing back good stuff, what stuff can you do interestingly with Steam, Cambridge, and Criminal? And I think one of the most important things is that you have to understand you're running HQ for this ability to fire. So there is like a bunch of cards that actually only fire after you've made a run on HQ. And they're kind of really good candidates because you've already done the requisite. So Emergency Shutdown is a fantastic card. You play it for 0, and it says you can only play it if you made a successful run on HQ. If you recur this, that part's already done, and now you basically get to derez a piece of ice. So you could kind of see Steve Cambridge's ability. If you run HQ, show the corporation Emergency Shutdown and Count Siphon, and now they're in a really bad choice. Their thing is going to, either one of their pieces of ice is going to be Emergency Shutdown for free because you've already ran HQ, or a Count Siphon will exist, and both of those are not good. That's like a very interesting decision. Other cards, not all of these are fantastic. Leverage is another successful run on HQ card. Can't really speak much about this card. I don't think it's that fantastic. Other things that you have, what else do we have specifically? We have Utopia Shard. I think this one's fantastic. And this one actually really cares a lot about the timing structure, because in theory, if you show the corporation Utopia Shard and then say like a Temujin contract or something that they really don't want to pick, you can now, because you get the Utopia Shard into your grip before you access, so in theory you can always install the Utopia Shard for free, which means you can always run HQ and then just trash 2 cards at random. So I'm thinking at some point the corporation will have to choose the other option, because recurring Utopia Shard infinitely is going to be a problem for them. I think this one's actually really good for 1 influence. Otherwise you have things like Apocalypse. Seems very hard to get working, but that's the idea. I think Political Operative is incredibly good, because again, Political Operative can only be installed if you run HQ, and if you show the corporation, either give me a Count Siphon, a Temujin, or whatever, or a Political Operative. A lot of times they'll give you Political Operative, and this card is worth its weight. It is so good, even in the modern meta where people are running a lot of defensive upgrades. And then I think that's mostly it. Exploit technically works too on that ability, but it's not, I don't think this card's phenomenal. You have other things. I think a really, really good candidate is Tapworm. Tapworm requires you to make a run on a central server, which you've already done. And if the corp just spend their entire turn purging to clear your Tapworm, you run HQ and you can say either I'm getting my Tapworm back or I'm getting something arguably better, or at least even in some cases 2 Tapworms. And I think that's incredibly demoralizing if it's either choice of, oh, well, they can get a Tapworm or they can get an Account Siphon. Like that's pretty rough, especially after you purge this thing. And that's awesome. Data Leak Reversal. Also very good. This is a entirely different deck, but the idea that you can run HQ and be like, oh, either I'm going to get that data leak that you just trashed back, and I've already made a run on the central server, or I'll get an Account Siphon back. That also seems really, really, really rough. En Passant is another cute option if they don't res ice on HQ. This is always a good thing to pull back. It is 2 influence, but what can you do? And then there's some other options like Fairy. Fairy is always good to pull back if you can, because it's cheap and free to install. It's good value. And you also have this thing, Rex. which I don't think I've see a lot of play recently, but the idea is if you have disposable cards, things like Cash or Rex, bringing them back is pretty good. And I think that's actually one of the weirder things about this deck. So a problem right now with criminals, and I don't think Steve Cambridge solves this problem, it's the problem with criminals right now is they're very susceptible to program trashing. And that was one of the things that people always wanted recursion in criminal, just so that if you do get your corroder trashed, your paperclip trashed, or paperclip doesn't count that much, but your corroder, your decoder trashed, you could always bring it back. And I think in a lot of situations, if your decoder, say your Gordian Blade is trashed, and you can't now get through, or say your passport, what have you, say you can't get through code gates anymore, I think if Steve Cambridge's ability fires and the choices between passport and an account siphon, I think the corp will never let you recur your breakers if you ever get them trashed. So I don't know if Steve Cambridge is a really good choice. Like, I don't think Steve Cambridge is going to save you from rig destruction, which is interesting and why I think the recursion ability is a lot more nuanced than just deja vu. Admittedly, like, this is a weird thing specifically, either with the meta or with the terminal directive, is that Steve Cambridge is really good at recursion, and yet there is the corp identity, Scorpio's defense system, which basically shuts Steve down. And I'm interested to see how these sort of games go in Terminal Directive where someone's playing Scorpios against Steve, because Steve wants to recur, and Scorpios is really good at shutting recursion down. So I don't know if these are that much fun to play against each other, because I think Scorpios definitely has the edge there. Now, if you're running HQ, and that's kind of your ability, you want to make that as good as possible, or as easy as possible, because you want this ability to fire as much as you can. And there's a bunch of ways to do that. I think it's really important to explore them at least. First, I think you got Sneak Door Beta. Sneak Door Beta is awesome. The other criminal runner, I think there's only one criminal runner that benefits from running HQ directly. Or no, I guess actually, no, there's two. Silhouette does as well. But the idea is that Sneak Door Beta is such an easy include in any Steve Cambridge deck, just because it makes it so much easier to run HQ after they overprotect it with ice. You can always just sneak around, and that's fantastic. Again, if you want to go very... if you want to target your HQ running and that's all you want to do really, I think Pheromones is honestly, like, it's a pretty fair include. It makes running HQ a lot cheaper, and that's fantastic. It doesn't combo that well with Tapworm because Purging is Purging, and then that gets rid of everything. I think Feint actually might be worth considering. It's kind of a hard include, but the idea is that you can pay 2 credits to bypass 2 pieces of ice on HQ, and that might be the only 2 pieces of ice on HQ. Sure, you can access cards from HQ, but at that point, you can fire Steve's ability, and it sort of makes Feint kind of like a deja vu that's incredibly limited with its recursion because the corp has some choice in it, but I think it's at least interesting and maybe worth consideration. Again, if you can just like make running HQ good and easy, there's a lot of these cards get better. So Desperado is really good. You get money from running HQ. Security Testing is also really good. You get 2 credits from running HQ, and basically anything that makes running HQ good is good. And I think that's fantastic. There's also a lot of cards coming in the pack that we'll be talking about in a couple minutes that both make running HQ easier, as well as are good ideas to recur. And I think that's absolutely fantastic. I think last thing maybe I want to talk about Steve real quick is that Rebirth is really good. Rebirth on Steve is really good. So the difference between Steve and the other like HQ running Gabriel Santiago is that Gabriel Santiago's ability is on from turn 1. Generally, click 1 on a Gabriel Santiago deck is run HQ, just so the corp reses ice and just so that you don't get money. But Steve Cambridge is honestly, if you don't have operations or events or anything else in the heap, Steve Cambridge turn 1 is useless. His ability doesn't matter. And he only turns on in the mid game once you have at least 2 cards in your heap. And then once one of those cards gets removed and you pull the other one back, you need 2 more cards in your heap for the ability to fire again. So it's kind of difficult to get his ability to fire every turn unless you're like constantly trashing your own cards or playing events or stuff like that. So I think Steve Cambridge only really comes online in the mid to late game when your heap is full and you have a lot of interesting options. And I think that's kind of cool and very different than Gabriel Santiago, who's a turn 1, let's go nuts. For that reason, I think actually Rebirth is totally worth considering. Rebirth has already been a really good card inside Criminal. Specifically, I think everyone just plays Andromeda, right? And I don't think that's a bad call here. Like, you can play Andromeda, start with a 9-card hand, and then once you have all these things in the heap, once you're good to go, you can Rebirth into Steve, and you actually get a lot of good value. Just because at that point, sure, you're playing Criminal, so people ice HQ, but if you're playing as Gabriel or Steve, I imagine people are going to over HQ and make it harder to get your ability off. And if you surprise suddenly become Steve, it's probably a lot better for you. Same thing also, like maybe you want to play Los in the early game, and then once you've got your value with Los and they've rezzed most of their ice, maybe rebirth into Steve. Like that sounds really good. Because Steve is technically best once your heap is full and you have like a toolbox of options. And then you can start making interesting decisions and putting the corp in bad places. Because if you want to recur account siphon, the best thing you can do is have 2 account siphons in the heap. And that's probably only going to happen to mid to late game. So Steve, it doesn't look like he's going to have an exciting early game, but if you want to rebirth into him, I think even if you play as him, he'll probably be pretty fun. I think it's a fascinating identity. And I love these identities that make the corp and the runner interact and both have like a pretty meaningful say in how the game's going to play. I think that's very high skill cap, and I'm excited to see very good Steve Cambridge play on top tables if he does show up there. Even at low tables, it'll be fun to watch. So we got a bunch of criminal events to go with this. I think a lot of them work with Steve. A lot of them are just good criminal events, I suppose. But let's start here. This is brute force hack. So this is a double event. It costs X, so you can choose how much you want to pay in this. The double means that you have to spend another click playing this event, and the event says derez a piece of ice that has a res cost of X or lower, and it costs 3 influence. So I don't know if you're going to see a lot of this outside of criminal. All right, so you pay 8. And the corp played 8 to res their toll booth, and now their toll booth is derez. So if they want to res it again, they have to pay another 8. So you're basically trading credit for credit with the corporation, which is something we've seen in a card before, and a card that's actually very, 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 very good, and it's Vamp. So Vamp says run HQ, drain your money, drain their money, and Vamp is very strong, and I think it's obvious how much more powerful this is, because you can make the corp go to 0 credits in 1 click, which makes the rest of your turn really easy, and then makes it really easy to capitalize on just about anything, because if the corp don't have money, they're just going to be clicking for credits for the next couple turns. Now, Brute Force Hack does that on a smaller scale. It also de-reses, which is interesting, but if you just want to see this as a trade econ for econ card, for a double, I don't know, that might actually be a bit harder to include. But de-resing is actually really strong. And that's the idea with this card, is to say the corporation is feeling comfortable and they have all their ice rezzed, but they don't have a lot of money because of course they've rezzed all their ice. Now if they want to like push for a scoring window or make sure they have ice on R&D so they don't lose to medium or keyhole, they always have to play the game where they have at least as much money as like they have to have, if there's a 6 credit ice on R&D and they don't want to get blown out on R&D to a medium or a keyhole, they have to make sure they always have at least 6 credits in their bank. Because otherwise you can brute force hack for 6, de-res their Fairchild, and then go nuts on R&D, and they can't res their ice, and you know they can't res their ice because you've just de-resed it and you know what it costs. That's actually very interesting, and maybe allows this card to have a slot in both aggressive decks and even control style decks. The sort of decks where you find, like you're trying to build to a board state where, oh, now there's no ice rezzed on R&D and they don't have a lot of money, surprise them with a keyhole go. Or very aggressive things where, oh, they rezzed a 5 strength piece of ice on HQ to keep me out and not get my Steve ability. I will pay 5 to de-res it just so I can land land a count siphon probably doesn't make sense because they can just res their ice, but so that you can start getting good accesses and run with Desperado and medium and turning wheel and all that sort of stuff. It's very interesting. Also, if they de-res the piece of ice and you know they can't res it, you can kind of pair this together with forged activation orders, which technically trashes ice. I don't think that's 3 clicks to trash a piece of ice and you spent a lot of money on it. That doesn't sound fantastic compared to other ways you can just trash ice. Again, you could also play brute force hack with en passant. Because in theory you can run a server, then brute force hack down their ice, and then en passant it. That technically works. That's 3 clicks though, and it doesn't sound fantastic, but if you want ice destruction in criminal, you got it. You definitely do have it. Also, it is an event, so you can use credits on prepaid voice pad to pay for brute force hack, but so it has Steve Cambridge on it, right? And it has a quote from him, but I think if you want to play this, you're almost definitely better off playing this in Los. Because Los gets money when you res ice, and at some point in time, with all the ices being rezzed, you want ways to de-res the ice. Totally worth talking about is comparing this to the other option of de-resing. And this is where this card gets kind of interesting and kind of not fantastic, is emergency shutdown. So So emergency shutdown, you have to run HQ. It costs 0. It's not a double though, and you derez any piece of ice. Now brute force hack, you have to pay the cost of the ice that you want to derez. Sometimes that's like, it's generally going to be a lot of money because derezing like cheap ice isn't really worth your time. It is a double. So basically you're trading off the paying the res cost of ice for not running HQ. But technically emergency shutdown also costs 2 clicks because you have to run HQ, but running HQ is probably a good thing worth doing anyways. Well, we're seeing more and more support in this cycle for derez effects and effects that give you money when you derez and re-res ice. So I think if you're playing Los and you have like 3 compromised employees down, playing brute force hack and paying 6 to derez a Fairchild 3 might actually not be that bad. The only thing I'm concerned about is that this is a double, and that's actually like a reasonable portion of your turn. But I think it's interesting, and if we have more and more cards like this that let you derez ice, a derez ice archetype might eventually exist. A denial deck that just derezes everything. Whether or not you want to fit Blackguard in there somehow, it's up to you. I'm not sure if that's possible, but that's the idea. And emergency shutdown's going to rotate out in 4 months, so maybe this is the replacement. I wouldn't be excited if that was the case, but it does what it says it does. It's a bit slow, it's a bit expensive, but derezing ice can be powerful if you want to play a control deck and you want to capitalize when the corp goes low on credits. You can blow that up to a really large window. Moving forward, this is Sphere Phishing. It's a run event. Costs 2 to play, and it says make a run. When you encounter the innermost piece of ice protecting the server, bypass it. It's also 3 influence. I think almost all the criminal cards in here are 3 influence, at least all the events. So I don't know how much we're going to see this outside of criminal. So this is a run event. Make a run, bypass a piece of ice. That's actually very similar for 2 credits. You've probably seen this card before. It's in the core set. It's called Inside Job. And these do very comparable things. Spear Phishing bypasses the innermost piece of ice on the server, so that's always going to exist on every server. Every server has an innermost piece of ice. While Inside Job bypasses the first piece of ice encountered. And this is the beginning of where I don't understand Spear Phishing, and I think Inside Job is just almost entirely strictly better. So, in the metagame, corporations, when they're playing against criminal, will almost never... They're very unlikely to score behind a single piece of ice if they're trying to rush out an agenda in the early game. Because sure, the runner could have their appropriate breaker, but more than likely if they're playing criminal, especially if they're just playing a lot of core set stuff, you can Inside Job any single piece of ice. Now, the natural counterplay to that was to put 2 pieces of ice on a server. So you have your 1 good ice on the innermost server, and then you put some sort of crappy ice and you staple it on the outside, so it's the second piece of ice on the server. So if the if the runner inside jobs that server, you can always res the outermost piece of ice, and now they inside job to vanilla, who cares? And now you res the innermost piece of ice if they continue, and it's a toll booth, and it ends the run. So Intelligent Play says if you don't want to lose the inside job, have 2 pieces of ice, and you want to put the better one on the inside so it doesn't get inside jobbed. That's very cool, because that means if you want to, that just slows, the existence of Inside Job alone slows down the game. So if the corporation is respecting Inside Job, you need 2 pieces of ice, and the placement is interesting. Now, Spear Phishing doesn't do that. Like Spear Phishing, same idea, bypass, run, 2 credits, play this in Kentenma, make a credit. But the idea is that you're always going to pass the innermost piece of ice. So abstractly, if you want to score behind a single piece of ice, same like Inside Job, you can't do that. It's not a good idea because they can always spearfish through the single piece of ice because it's technically the innermost. So the next thing you want to do, just like Inside Job, is put a piece, staple on some crappy ice on the outside part of that server. But now, if the runner spearfishes that server, you just res the outermost piece of ice, and it ends the run. I don't think I'm doing that very elegant job at explaining this, but the idea is Inside Job only bounces ice that is encountered. Derezed, unresed ice, like face down ice, is never encountered, it's approached. So if the corporation wants to stop you inside jobbing a server, you have to res 2 pieces of ice to keep the runner out. You need 2 pieces of ice, because the first one res will be inside job, so you have to res the second one. Spearfishing can be blocked with 2 pieces of ice on a server, but you only have to res the outside one. Right? Because the inside one is always going to be bypassed no matter what. That's what this ice does. But the outside one, you can just res and it'll end the run. It's much, much, much easier in this game to stop a spearfishing attempt than it is to stop an inside job. And that's absurd. Like, that's a really big deal considering they cost the same price and they're competing for the same sort of deck slot. On top of that, like I guess the best thing about spear phishing is that inside job does exist, because the natural counterplay, just like we said with inside job, is put your good ice on the innermost and put crappy ice on the outside. And the thing is, if they do that, yeah, inside job doesn't get good value because you still have to break the good piece of ice. But spear phishing does the opposite and kind of like laughs at the face of the corporation who built a good inside job proof server, or inside job resistant server at least. And spear phishing technically throws that math on its head, and that's interesting. But I think if I have only 2 deck slots to play a card like this, I would always play inside job. The other better thing about inside job is it has to do with like with the linear nature of time itself. The idea is that early in the game, if you're running a server, the innermost piece of the ice on a server is probably going to be rezzed, and as the game goes on, ice is attached on the outside portion of a server. It just builds outwards and outwards. So if you're using an inside job or spear phishing in the medium to late game, you're more than likely want to play it because you don't want to deal with unrezzed ice, because unrezzed ice messes with your calculations. You can't know if it's going to cost you 7 credits to get into the server or 12 credits to get in the server. So you always want an inside job, so all the ice that's unrezzed, or at least the first unrezzed piece of ice, you don't have to deal with. Now, spearphishing will never, spearphishing just cares about the innermost piece of ice, which is the ice that's probably already rezzed, which is the ice that you probably already know how much it takes to break. So you're hoping, firstly, that it costs less than 2 credits to break, but it'll never help you, like, it never gives you a big tempo hit unless the innermost piece of ice is really, really, really good. And even then, like, this card has to save you at least 3 credits, right? Otherwise, you could just play easy mark. I guess this one's a bit better because you also make a run, but that's the problem with it. I think inside job is just 100% better, and we're not seeing a lot of competitive decks, if you want to play competitive criminal, that are running 2 to 3 copies of inside job. So I just don't see how you'd run spearphishing when it's worse than inside job in almost every scenario, every way. I'm not entirely sure about this card. It does punish inside job servers if you put the ice on the inside, but I'd much rather just play something like, I'd rather play something like brute force hack, or more likely emergency shutdown if I want to deal with ice on the inside that's just too expensive for me to break. I think inside job is flat out better. I think it's interesting that it exists, so now you have more options to bypass ice, because that's a really cool thing for criminals to do, but I just think it's 100% worse than inside job, and I can't figure out a way that I would want to put a deck with 3 of these and 3 of inside job, because I think that's the only deck that would play this. Maybe you want to play this in Ken Tenma, because you do get more value out of this. Maybe you want to play this with a public terminal, or even prepaid voice pad, which lets you play runs for cheap, but even then, this doesn't seem like a good card slot. I'm not entirely sure why it's there, but at least it's on brand, I guess. This is SYN Attack. SYN Attack is a real thing. This is what a SYN Attack looks like. Kind of hard to see the image, but the idea is it's a denial of service attack in which one entity spams a server with synchronization. They want to get acknowledged through synchronization, so you just send a lot of these SYN messages to a server. Now, if you tie up the server dealing with all your SYN spam, they can't respond to other people, and they get locked out of the server, and they get locked out, and this is why it's a denial of service attack. Yeah, it's a real thing, and I think this card actually is kind of, again, on brand with what it does. I think that's pretty cool that they're doing that. So it's 2 credits to play. It's a double, so it takes 2 clicks. On that note, we've seen 2 doubles so far, so what's the chance that Starlight Crusade funding? Yeah, that's right. Make your Starlight deck at some point. Anyways, you play this, you spend half your turn doing it, you spend 2 credits doing it, and you're giving the corporation another choice. Choices are pretty fun, and the corp either has to discard 2 cards or draw 4 cards. This seems like it is a piece in the flood archetype. And the flood archetype is something that hasn't been explored that much before. It's generally been explored with one word. That word is Fisk. Whether it be Laramie Fisk, the savvy investor, this was chosen off of, this was one of the 2 IDs that won the Kronos protocol. What's it? This was a choice. It basically was a contest winner. And Laramie says, run a central server, make the runner draw a card, or the corp draw a card, sorry. And Fisk Investment Seminar says each player draws 3 cards. Now, you're thinking drawing cards is a good thing, and a lot of people put cards in their deck that make them draw cards, and that's true, but the idea is with a corporation, if you start your turn with 5 cards, 6 cards when you mandatory draw, and the runner has played a SYN Attack and now you draw 4 more cards, you start your turn with 9 cards in hand. And the fact that you only have 3 clicks to install things, and maybe you're not ready to score agendas, you're going to have to both throw out things from your deck, so you're just going to have ice in your hand that you can't afford to install because you don't want to throw out your agendas, so you're going to throw those out straight away. And then your hand is going to be full of agendas. So now running HQ has a higher probability ability of giving an agenda to the runner. And that's really, really, really strong. On top of that, it is a win condition in this game that if the corporation can't draw a card from their deck, they lose. So you can, and these sort of abilities do help you mill the corporation down. And that's also it hasn't been proven to be a strong archetype outside of like noise and data leak reversal, but there's a chance that we're building towards that inevitability. Now, I think SYN Attack, funny enough, is actually, like, I don't see it making that much sense in this archetype. And that's because it gives a choice. And it's good that it gives a choice, so it's not like a very, very mean card, but like these are the two issues. Say the runner doesn't have a lot of cards. Okay, say the runner has a lot of cards in their hand because you played Fisk Investment Seminar, and now they're starting their turn with 8 cards in their hand. If you play a SYN Attack, which is going to be your click 2 and click 3, the corporation has a choice. They either discard 2 cards or they draw 4 more. If they draw 4 more, it's probably going to be an issue because now they're going to start their turn with what? They have 8 cards in their hand, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 with mandatory draw. They're going to start their turn with 13 cards in their hand. And that's an issue because they're probably going to end up throwing out 5 of them, which means they've gone through a lot of their deck. But in that scenario, they will 100% choose discard 2 cards. And that's the problem. It's like if the corp has 8 cards in hand and you play SYN Attack, and it takes a lot of time and money to play SYN Attack, they're just going to discard 2 cards. It's also very important to understand that discard 2 cards is not at random. And if that was what was printed on this card would be a lot better. But if I'm going to start my turn with 9 cards in hand after you fisk me and I get a mandatory draw, I'm always going to pick discard 2 cards at random just because I was going to have to throw out 2 cards anyways at the end of my turn, so I might as well throw them out now. Admittedly, you don't have full information because you don't know whether your mandatory draw, but that's at least something. You also don't want to throw out agendas because if you don't have Jackson on the table, they can just run archives because they have clicks left in their turn. But that's kind of the idea. On top of that, Friends in High Places does see a lot of play, so sometimes discarding 2 cards actually gives you tempo in theory. Like you can discard 2 cards and now get them both on the table for 1 click with friends. Like that's kind of unfortunate. So I think in all scenarios where the corp has a lot of cards in hand, they'll always pick the discard 2 cards. Admittedly, if they're not discarding agendas, now running HQ gets better. So say they had 8 cards in their hand and now they discard down to 6, they might actually have 2 out of 6 cards be agendas, so running HQ does get better. And that's totally worth looking into. On the opposite side of the coin, if I have 1 card in hand and you play this, I'm always going to draw 4 cards. If I don't have a lot of cards in my hand, I'll always draw and never discard. So I think this card, like the way it exists, will never put the corporation in a really, really bad spot, but can be annoying at like just medium levels. Like if the corp has 5 cards in hand and you just play this, I don't know what you choose. I really don't. If I have 5 cards in hand, it depends on the board state, whether I want to discard 2 or whether I want to draw 4 more. Because they're both, it's totally up to the corp, and both those options can be good based on the board state. Very interesting thing about this is the choice of HQ multi-axis. If the corp has 5 cards in hand and you play SYN Attack and they discard down to 3, 3 is a perfect number because you can now legwork and access every single card from HQ. So if there's an agenda in there, you'll get it. Now, if they draw 4 cards and now they're up to 9, you might want to shift your HQ multi-axis to information sifting. And now information sifting can access maybe best case scenario half of those cards. And you just have... there's a chance of getting more agendas. And I think that's really fun that you can always punish this as long as you have the availability of those options, that you can be like, oh, SYN Attack you drew, we'll sift, or you threw out, we'll legwork. And I think that's kind of interesting. But otherwise, like there's just like the release valve attached to this card, I think will never make it so it's absurdly atrocious just because it doesn't combo well with a lot of the other mill stuff. Cause I don't know. If this set discard 2 cards at random, it'd be a totally different story because that actually gets scary. But I'm not that impressed with this. I think it's really good that there's more cards that force the corp to draw in theory, and there's one more coming up right after this, so we'll take a look at that. It's also very expensive to play. Like 2 clicks, 2 credits is not nothing. Like that has to be doing a lot of work, so I don't know how possible that is. I think this archetype will get more and more support, so we'll see. And this is more and more support. This is Polyhistor. Polyhistor, mind you, is a Greek word. It means a person of a lot of knowledge or gifted or learned in multiple disciplines. So that's interesting enough because of how this card works, I guess. This is a criminal consult. Costs 4, which is it's fairly expensive for a criminal console, sort of. Not really. It gives you 1 MU, which is a good start. It also gives you 1 link, which is pretty sweet if you ask me. I hope link becomes a thing, I guess. And it says the first time you pass all of the ice protecting HQ, you may draw 1 card to force the corp to draw 1 card. limit 1 console per player, as most consoles are. 4 influence, probably not going to see this outside. But this is really good support for this sort of mill archetype. And I think this is really cool because it's a mill card similar to Fisk Investment Center that also helps you. It's a flood card that also helps you. So with Laramie Fisk, this seems to be Laramie Fisk's console, 100%. And the idea is you can run HQ, force the corp to draw 2 cards, and you draw 1 card. At the beginning of their mandatory draw, they now have 3 cards in their hand. They have 3 more cards, so they're starting the turn at 8 cards. And that does give them a lot of options, but also does pinch them. If they're not ready to score, these cards are going to clog up in hand. So to give you a bit of an idea of... I don't remember how to spell this card. Oh, I'm gonna botch unscheduled. I can spell that. Oops. So there's 2 cards that I think need to be discussed when you talk about this sort of archetype. One is this Criminal Current that saw very little play, but I think is getting better and better the more of these cards there are, and the more the meta is playing 18 pieces of ice in their deck. And that's unscheduled maintenance. The idea is that if you have this card down and you play SYN Attack and force them to draw, or you play Fisk Investment Seminar or Fisk, or you play Polyhistor and you get them to draw, is that the corp cannot install more than 1 piece of ice each turn. So the idea is that if they just drew into 3 pieces of ice, they're going to have to throw some of that ice out. And throwing ice out is really good because it just decreases their defenses through the whole game. And I think that's actually really strong together. I've been playing this card a bit in flood decks, and it actually does a lot more work than you might think. Another one, oh, I forget the name of it, but I think we have it open. I hope we do. Yeah, here we go. This is System Outage. This also in theory works. It doesn't work particularly well with Polyhistor unless you also are playing Fisk, because you have to make them draw twice in a turn. But it basically says if you force the corp to draw a card and then draw another cards, which can be done with Fisk and Polyhistor, they lose a credit. That's okay. That's all right. I think for 2 influence, actually the better option most of the time is Hacktivist Meeting. And because this not only puts pressure on HQ and makes some trash cards in there, which they might have more agendas than normal, it also prevents the worst part of, it's like by far the worst part of flood decks. I think one of the big reasons people haven't been exploring this sort of archetype where you're flooding the corp is that flooding an asset-heavy corp, like if you're playing against a corporation that runs 25 assets, making them draw 3 extra cards before the turn starts is like having a free Sensi's Actor Union. And that sucks. Like, that's so bad. So now they just do 3 more assets, they install 3 of them, you can't go check them. And the idea is Hacktivist Meeting really helps a lot. I've been noticing a lot less asset spam due to the new most wanted list, so I'm more excited to play this archetype, but back in the day it was a pretty bad choice a lot of the time. It actually lost you the game faster than anything else you could do. Same for fast advanced decks. Making fast advanced decks draw things is generally bad. Gang Sign, also it's very integral to this game plan. Gang Sign also works very well with HQ interface, and HQ interface works incredibly well on top of that with Polyhistor. Coolest thing about Polyhistor, which is which actually does goof with things pretty heavily, is that at the end of your turn, before you end the corporation's turn, you understand the probabilities in certain things. If you have 1 agenda in HQ, you understand how heavily you have to protect HQ. If you have 2 agendas, so forth, like it changes how you play the game and how you build your servers. Polyhistor messes with that pretty heavily. The idea is that at any point in time, cards can enter HQ, or at least 1 card can enter HQ, really changes that. You also are taking a card off the top of R&D, which is pretty interesting for other reasons. But the idea is that if you're playing HQ interface because you're playing Gang Sign, you can now run HQ. And now you're accessing 2 out of 5 cards. And say there's only 1 agenda in there, but suddenly Polyhistor fires and there's 2 agendas in there, you just have a higher chance of getting agendas. It just makes things good. You also have a chance of drawing a card off the top of the deck that is not an agenda that dilutes those odds. But the idea is that if you have a lot of HQ pressure, this is good. It's actually, you're better off if you're pressuring HQ to get possible agendas into HQ. Cool thing too is you're forcing the corp to draw cards off the top of R&D, so you can play stuff like Find the Truth. And this actually gets like really nuanced and interesting, where you run HQ. You may look at the top card of R&D and you see, oh, that's an agenda. I'm not going to run R&D this turn, so let's get that into HQ. And then you access HQ and hopefully get it. You can also do that in the reverse order, or you can also run R&D, see the top card and be like, okay, well, that's an ice. Then run HQ, force the corporation to draw that card, and then run back on R&D. And I think that's really good. That also gets some really interesting things when you play spy cameras. right? Because you can like look at the top card of R&D, spy camera. You can look at the top card of R&D, see it's not an agenda, run HQ, force the corp to draw that card, get accesses on HQ, and then run R&D again and maybe see a fresh card. Like, I think there's some interesting things to do with it. I don't know how fantastic they are compared to other options, but it actually gives a lot of flexibility. And the fact that it's a console that basically says, besides the drawing thing, it says run HQ if successful, draw a card. That's pretty good. Card draw is one of the best things in Netrunner. Desperado is a really good card. It obviously gives credits wherever you run, no matter what, but this says run HQ, gain a card, and that's also worth something. Also, just shout outs to this, because this is a really big piece in this sort of mill deck. Play Equivocation. It's super good. You can really force the corp to draw a lot of cards. It's really, really, really good. All in all, this is a console that's very specific with what it does. I don't think this is like a very good inclusion into like any vanilla criminal deck. You really have to be going into the idea of punishing the corporation for drawing a lot and actually milling them out in some sort of way. 1 link is good, 1 MU is great, 4 is a bit on the expensive side, but I think it's totally palatable. I think all in all it's good, and it might do a lot to push this mill archetype. Again, this mill archetype is like very meta situational. If you play this in an asset spam meta, you're in a really bad spot. This is Abagnale, and this is the first of the Swindler breakers. I don't think these breakers have a good name yet. There's like they're all named after famous con artists and swindlers or grifters. I'm gonna go for swindlers. I like that word. But we got 3 of them, and they're all named after famous swindlers. The first one is named Abagnale, which is named after this dude here, Frank Abagnale Jr. And this is what he looks like up there. If you've you might have actually heard of this guy's story. If you've ever seen the Academy Award nominated film Catch Me If You Can, 2002, it starred Leonardo DiCaprio. This is the story of Frank Abagnale. He was a pretty good con person. Like, he just pretended he was other people. One of the big things he did is he pretended he was an airline pilot. Apparently got away with it, which is why we have an airship on here. Interestingly enough, this guy is now works for the FBI, and he does a lot of talks about cybersecurity and fraud prevention, which is cool that he turned his life around. Yeah, this is one of the 3 grifters, and you got a decoder here, it's actually a pretty good card. So this is an icebreaker decoder. It comes in for 4 credits for 1 MU. That's not too bad. And let's talk what it does. For 1 credit, you break a code gate subroutine. That's really good. 1 for 1 is fantastic. You generally can't ask for better than that. 2 credits, you boost +2 strength. Yeah, that's technically worse than 1 for 1 since you overpay on odd numbers, but that's not bad. That's basically 1 for 1 with less control. And it comes in at 2 strength, which is honestly not too bad at all. That's really not too bad. If you want to compare that to Gordian Blade, which is a 4 install cost Goridon, it's very similar. It's very similar. Gordian Blade keeps strength to the end of the run, but you're basically 1 per 1, 1 subroutine, 2 strength, 4 install cost, 1 MU. It's kind of similar to Abagnale. And that's been one of the things that I almost always find myself spending influence on when building a criminal deck, is that the decoders and criminals suck. They really do suck, and we'll look at them in a second, but this is a good one. All the Swindler breakers also have this ability where you can trash the program itself to bypass any piece of ice of the type, so this is a code gate ice, that you're currently encountering, even if the strength is greater than Abagnale. So you don't care about boosting strength, it's just, oh, piece, and you bypass that piece of ice. That's interesting. It's definitely a good ability. I think on a program that costs 4 to install, that's not something you're going to be using it. Like, I don't think you're going to install this the same way you install like Crowbar to trash it to bypass things. Like, that just doesn't sound fantastic. In theory, you could play this in Geist and then trash them to draw cards. You could play this with Tech Trader to make money. But for 4 credits as an install cost, that doesn't seem anywhere near as good as just playing the other options that you have available to you. So as far as I'm concerned, this like trash thing is just a panic button. It's just a panic button where, oh, if you hit a piece of code gate and you can't get through it and you think it's important to get through it, or it's important that the code gate doesn't fire, you can always throw out your breaker and get into the server. I also think that's going to produce some potentially very interesting game states and like high stakes tournaments perhaps, where the corporation understands, yeah, the runner can get into the server to steal this agenda, maybe it's game point or not, but they'd have to trash their decoder. What's the chance they're going to do that? They know they can do that. I know they know they can do that. And you might actually get some like really interesting plays where you have to trash your permanent breaker just to be able to win or not lose the game. And I think that's fascinating, and I'm glad that exists. Yeah, just to give you an idea why I'm excited about this card, because I'm not excited about the ability, and the numbers are like all right. If you just look at like the criminal decoders, subtype decoder, you'll notice one thing: they're all crap. That's kind of a thing you can say about most just criminal breakers altogether. But Abagnale I think is the best. Rex is pretty okay. Crowbar is good. Leviathan, nope. Passport's actually fantastic, but it's only for central servers. So your options to date have been Peacock, which breaks 2 for 3, which isn't terrible, but you're paying 2 per subroutine. And this is something we'll talk about on the Shaper side of this unboxing, but 2 per subroutine is pretty brutal because a lot of code gates have 2 or 3 subroutines, and that's just not great. And then you have Peregrine, which is also very similar in some ways. 3 for 3, costs more to install, 1 per subroutine. But if you give me a choice between Peregrine and Abagnale, I'll almost always go for Abagnale, because very few decks actually use Peregrine's derez ability unless they're built around it, while Abagnale's good no matter what. 3 for 3 is pretty rough. Yeah, 3 for 3 is pretty rough. Maybe not. I don't know. Anyways, I think this one's good. I think this is really good. It's definitely, I think, a better option than Peregrine. It's cheaper to put on the table. It's great. Good code gate breaker. Good to see. This is Lustig. Lustig is another swindler, and Lustig is a pretty interesting swindler. This is Victor Lustig. That's him up there. And he is famous as a con artist who sold the Eiffel Tower twice. It's a pretty interesting story if you read it, but he basically pretended that he was selling the Eiffel Tower to scrap metal people, and he managed to sell it and made off with the money, and then tried to sell it again, and then he eventually did get caught. He was sentenced eventually to 20 years in Alcatraz prison, but he ended up dying to pneumonia before that happened. It's a spoilers. It's a cool story, totally worth reading. What a fucking weirdo. This is named after him. He also got an Eiffel Tower on there. I think that's fantastic. It's a killer. So it breaks sentries. It's 5 to install, so pretty pricey. 1 per subroutine, not too bad, but 3 for +5 strength. Ugh. And then again, you can bypass a sentry currently being countered. Never boast, just let your importance be quietly obvious. And that quote actually comes, Lustig had these like 10 commandments of con artistry, and they're pretty interesting. One of them is never boast, let your importance be quietly obvious, but there's some other funny ones like hint at sex talk, but don't follow it up unless other person shows a strong interest, or wait for the other person to reveal any political opinions and then agree with them. Also, never get drunk. Yeah, anyways, that's cool flavor. So, okay, 5 to install, comes in a 1 strength, by the way, 3 influence, but it comes in a 1 strength, 1 to sentry subroutine, 3 to +5 strength boost. We've seen this before. Oh, we've seen this before. This is Ninja, right? This is just a slightly different Ninja. Ninja's 4 to install, but same idea. Comes in at 0, which is a bit worse, obviously, but 1 for sentry subroutine, 3 +5 strength. These things are so similar, it's kind of shocking. Like, you're basically paying 1 up front for 1 extra strength, and this has a technically a better ability if you ever want to fire this, which I don't think you can build your deck around it, considering it's 5 to install. Like, how many times are you going to install Lustig? But yeah, what's with that? So the math between these two, if you run Ninja and nobody runs Ninja, for what that's worth, is that this is better at breaking 6 strength sentries, and there's not that many 6 strength sentries in the game, let alone 6 strength sentries that you have to worry about. I still think Lustig is better than Ninja technically, but Ninja wasn't catching the world on fire. Actually, this one's better at breaking 1 strength sentries. That's the best part about it. Is you can break Koma Inu for credits, or you can break things for not a lot. Yeah, there's a bunch of 1 strength sentries. That's a thing. But yeah. Okay. So the way that they designed Netrunner is every faction, all of the runner factions were meant to be good at breaking a certain type of subtype. A certain subtype of ice. And criminals got sentries. So criminals were meant to be good at sentry breakers, and for the most part that isn't entirely true, which is kind of unfortunate. Like, Fairy is really good, it's a one-shot use though. Femme Fatale is pretty clumsy, but it's technically one of the better breakers in the whole game. And then I think the only time that this like idea has ever rang true is Mongoose, which is a good icebreaker. It's easy to put down. It breaks 1 for 2 sentry subroutines. That's kind of really, really, really good. Oh, Switchblade's also really good. But the point I'm saying is that Mimic exists. And Mimic has almost always been the best sentry breaker in the game. As much as it is limited, you can affect this with like Net Ready Eyes and Data Sucker. But I'm just saying, if you have a faction that's meant to be good at breaking sentries, why are cards like this being printed? Like, this card isn't fantastic. It breaks Ichi for 6. Mimic breaks Ichi for 1 Data Sucker counter and 3. And it's also cheaper to install. Like, I don't get it. I just wish this whole idea of like, oh, criminals are good at sentry breakers actually mattered. And that might be balanced out by the fact that criminals shouldn't be having good breakers. That's kind of meant to be their weakness, is that they actually cost a lot of money to get into servers, but when they get in, they make money. So I don't know. I just was hoping that this would be better, because this is technically, sorry if I hit the microphone, I think this is much worse than their decoder. Much worse than their decoder, which is kind of nutty. Ending up this Swindler package, this is Demara. The color on this, and this is a great image. Demara is Ferdinand Waldo Demara. He was the Great Imposter, which was, they made a film in 1960 called The Great Imposter about this person's life. This guy, I didn't hear about Demara before, but this person basically went around and pretended they were different people, very similar to Abagnale. But from our understanding, this person didn't do this because of economic reasons. They just kind of like to do it. They just like the respectability. So they pretended they were like prison wardens, professors, doctors, engineers, lawyers, monks. This guy pretended to be a bunch of monks. They founded a college at some point. It's a weird story. Yeah, very, very interesting story. But this is named after Waldo Demara. It's a barrier breaker. It's a fractor. 4 to install. For 2 credits, you get to break up to 2 barrier subroutines. So, yeah, if you're breaking a vanilla, it's going to cost you 2 credits. That's not fantastic. And then 2 credits for +3 strength, which is good. It's a bit clumsy, but it's good that you're getting more than 1 for 1. And then, of course, you can bypass a barrier if you so want it, even if the strength doesn't match. Now, Demara also has kind of similar, very similar numbers to Breach. Breach only works on central servers. Oops. But the idea with Breach is you get 2 for 3 barrier subroutines and then 2++4. This is just slightly worse in every aspect. It's less strength, twice as expensive to install. Does work on remote servers, but it's still not great. And I don't think this card's almost ever going to see play. I think it's incredibly expensive to break things. If you hit like a spider web, which admittedly isn't that popular of a piece of ice, but like if you just hit a spider web, I think it costs you 6 credits. Which sucks a lot, considering now, yeah, like that's 6 credits. Eli's 4 credits, which isn't amazing, but it's not terrible. But the idea is that one of the biggest weaknesses of criminals is breakers. So people spend influence on breakers, and you'd rather just play paperclip any day of the week if you have the influence. And if you don't have the influence, you'll probably make room for the influence. Because if you're just breaking 1 vanilla the whole game for 2 credits, it's not great. This one's not fantastic. And after this whole Swindler, this whole Swindler thing, I think Abagnale is 100% good. It's playable. It's definitely playable. And Lustig is not good. It's ninja good. And Demara is a criminal fractor, which means you should probably not look at it too much. But yeah, that's a Swindler thing. The bypass ability is interesting. It's yet to be seen whether you can build like a whole deck that just wants to throw these out to bypass things. But I think it's just kind of like a panic button. It also, for what it's worth, it makes corporate troubleshooter and IT department a bunch worse. It also lets you fight Sandberg if that ever becomes a problem. Only a single piece of ice, and that's also kind of the issue with this. If you trash this while running on a server and you need it for the next ice, it's gonna suck. But yeah, you'll end the run. But that's the idea. We have another icebreaker here though, and this one is interesting. This is Mammon. And it's an AI in Criminal, which is crazy. That kind of falls into the same sort of crazy as, wait, we have recursion in Criminal? Like, they're breaking all the rules, and I think that's fantastic in some ways. Mammon, for those who don't know, I didn't know this. It's from the New Testament. And it's commonly thought to mean money and material wealth, and it's actually been personified a lot of times as a deity or a devil, sometimes included in the 7 Princes of Hell. But it's basically this sort of like money, wealth, creature, greed object that is meant to be a sign of bad things, and that makes a lot of sense why you got this like gold devil that's consuming people in some sort of hellish landscape. Also, maybe I'm reading into this too much, but it looks like it has the Titan like credit symbol on its chest. But then again, it does also recur over here. Yeah, maybe it does have the Titan all over it. I don't know. I think that's pretty cool if that's actually what's happening here. Anyways, We will celebrate greed with Mammon. It's an icebreaker AI, so it doesn't care about the subtype of the ice it's breaking. It'll break decoders, code gates, it'll break barriers, it'll break killers. And it functions real strange. 3 to install 1 MU. It starts at 0 strength, and you can pay 2 credits to boost +2 strength, which isn't terrible, but the fact that it starts at 0 strength is kind of rough. Now, when your turn begins, you may pay X credits to place X power counters on Mammon. When your turn ends, you have to wipe all the hosted power counters off of Mammon, and the reason why you want power counters on here is you have to spend a hosted power counter at any paid ability window to break an ice subroutine. That's cool. This is really cool. It's like some weird child between Overmind and Crypsis, I guess. Overmind's the same idea. You get power counters on it, hosted power counter, break ice subroutine, except also 0 strength. Except this one, you have to put it down, and you have to basically kind of guess and predict how much money you need to feed this beast for it to be good for you. And I think that's absolutely fascinating. The biggest reason why AIs were a scary thing in Criminal is, again, account siphon. I guess we should pull this up for the point of it. The idea is that people were playing a lot of AIs in Criminal, and you could throw down your Faust or your Knight down turn 1 and account siphon immediately from turn 1, and that sucks because you put the corp on 0 credits. They have nothing to do with a click for credits. All their servers fall apart. It's kind of an issue. And so the designers of this game were very, very cautious about giving the criminals an easy way to get into any server, even if it's just for a simple account siphon. Mammon does nothing on the turn you put on the table. Because the turn you put on the table, you don't have any opportunity to put power counters on it, so it actually does nothing, and it just says, "Hey Corp, next turn we're coming for you." That's quite interesting. I think that's a very powerful card to put on the table, but it makes it so that the cheese turn 1 account siphon is going to happen less often, or at least give the corporation a turn to like put down assets so they can duck the account siphon, or put another piece of ice on HQ so they can res both of them and have no money, stuff like that. And I think that's really, really interesting. So, firstly, you're going to spend a lot of money on this thing. Actually, not like a lot of money on this thing, but like a fair amount of money. The worst part about this card, I think, is the 0 strength. If this was 2 strength, it would be a pretty good breaker already. Just because you're paying 1 per strength and basically 1 per subroutine. Yes, it gets a bit worse when it comes to odd subroutine cards, but on its own, this is not a terribly ineffective breaker. Yeah, it's honestly really not that bad. Now, the cool thing about this is that if you're like trying to use this on unresed ice, you'll have no idea how many power counters to put on there. Maybe the ice is Komainu and it has 5 subroutines because you have 5 cards in hand, or maybe it's just vanilla. So it's kind of up to you to think, okay, well, it could be an Ichi and I want 3 counters on it, but it also could be, I don't know, a Janus or what have you. So you probably are, in more times often than not, going to over-invest in this, and that's kind of the greed idea of this thing about it, how you feed so much money into this and you respect the finances, and at the end, a lot of it gets wasted and thrown out, I guess. Like, I think that's very, very, very cool. One of the best things to play with this card 100% is the E3 feedback implants, and actually that turns off a lot of the downsides of this card. E3 feedback implants says when you break a subroutine, you can just break additional subroutines by paying a credit. So now every piece of ice, you just have to have 1 power counter on this thing, and then you can pay the rest with E3 feedback implants. So I think you're going to see these cards together a lot of the time, just because they're very, very, very good together, and it takes off the risk of this. You just know every piece of ice 1 power counter, as long as you're only running once, and that also makes it very interesting. All in all, I think this is a fine breaker. I think it is a slightly expensive. It's clumsy to use. You can also, because this is technically using a program, you can put the power counters on there with like multi-threader. You can put the power counters on there with cyber feeder, stuff like that. You're gonna lose them at the end of your turn. There's technically, you could use Dr. Lovegood. Like, you can use a multi-threader to put tokens on Mammon and then Dr. Lovegood it so they don't wipe until the end of the turn, and then build this giant Mammon. But I'm not sure if that you want to do that, because you're just gonna lose all the counters in 1 turn anyways. I'm not sure if that's actually worth your time. But at least it's interesting. But I just think overall this is a fine breaker. This is also a good backup breaker, because in theory, if you lose if you lose, say, your killer, your sentry killer to program destruction, you at least have something to get through ice. It's also really good against cheaper ice. Like in theory, if all the ice is res on the table and your barrier breaker, heaven forbid, is Demara, and you're breaking vanillas, a lot of times you just be like, okay, well, I'll just put one token on Mammon because I know I'm gonna run R&D this turn and use Mammon instead. Like that's actually not too bad. If you see that you have Mammon down and then like a suite of 3 other breakers, it doesn't have to be these 3, but there are situations in which using the Mammon could be the most profitable way to get into certain servers. Probably not all the time, but at least sometimes that might actually be pretty good. And I think that's interesting. I think it's a fine backup breaker. I'm interested to see the aggression this can pull off because it's slightly slow aggression. It's like, oh, this is down on the table. Next turn, I'm coming for you. And I don't think it's that expensive to use. Also, if you're running an AI, you have to understand there's cards that counter that. So you have to respect your swordsmans. IP block is another card you might see. There's bulwark. There's just cards you have to respect once it's on the table, so that changes the game state a bit. Also, people have been playing Vama Deva in criminal decks just so that they have a way to break typeless ice. Things like Mother Goddess, perhaps. What's the other one? Excalibur, things like that. And putting this in your deck might be a fine way to deal with it. I'm interested to see if Mammon decks will exist or whether this will just be a supplementary tool, but Mammon with E3 feedback implants isn't too terrible. I think as soon as you have a way to permanently boost the strength on this thing, or at least make it easier to boost, this can actually be pretty good. I think that's interesting. Alright, this is Charlatan. It's a resource, it's a virtual resource, so you can maybe play this in Apex if you want. It's 5 to install, which is pretty expensive, and it says spend 2 clicks, make a run. The first time you approach a rezzed piece of ice during this run, you may pay credits equal to the strength of that ice to bypass it. And it's for influence, so you're probably not going to see it outside of criminal. Alright, so it's basically inside job on a stick. It's the idea is that it's unlimited inside jobs because you're going to bypass the first piece of ice you encounter. However, plural. However, it's massively expensive. This thing is a 5 cost virtual resource. Yes, you can play this cheaper with career fair, but the way that you're going to use it and the cost associated with playing it, you might want to consider this just to be a breaker. It doesn't make that big of a difference, but this is basically, you're going to want to use this a lot if you want to pay 5 credits to put it down. Now, there's a couple of issues with this. Firstly, I think this card would be so much better if it let you use the clicks during the run in some way. Like you can spend 2 clicks and pay the strength of the ice to bypass it, because the problem with this card is that you have to spend 2 clicks making the run, so you can't actually combine that with anything else. Like if you want to play a count siphon, you can't, because a count siphon takes a click to play. So this card is only going to give you accesses, may that be single accesses or double or multi-accesses if you have medium or all the other multi-access cards, but otherwise you're basically paying 2 clicks to make a run. And not do like a cool fancy run, but just basically get like an inside job on a stick. Inside job, you notice you pay 2 credits and you bypass a piece of ice. This one you have to pay the res cost of the ice. So that ranges anywhere between 0 credits if you need to bypass a vanilla for some reason, or up to like 5-6 strength. And you're seeing 5 and 6 strength ice in places. Like that's not absurd. So if you're playing Charlatan for 5 and then spending 2 clicks and 5 more credits just to bypass a Fairchild, I think you probably are better off just playing your breaker or playing D-Res effect. Like this is an extremely expensive card in clicks and credits. Like you're spending half your turn to make a single run and still paying a lot of money to bypass something. It's just not fantastic. Interesting enough, this is the first time you approach a rezzed piece of ice, so it's not going to fire on unrezzed ice. And also, you technically don't encounter ice, so any ability that fires off of the first time you encounter, or any effect that fires off the first time you encounter, I don't think there's a lot of those. I think it's just like Kit, if you want to spend influence in Kit, I guess. That gets you a bit further. Yeah, first time you encounter it gets code gate, so you can get through 2 pieces of ice, but like this just seems absurdly expensive to use. If it's a low strength piece of ice and if it has a lot of subroutines, sometimes it'll be cheaper to bypass it with Charlatan. But if it has not a lot of subroutines and it's a low strength piece of ice, you're probably better off just putting another copy of your breaker in your deck, installing that for 5 credits or less, and just bypassing it and not spending 2 clicks. That's how I understand it, right? Like 5 credits is a lot, 2 clicks is a lot to make a run, and then you still have to pay what could be the same as breaking it with your program, right? Like you can bypass an Enigma for 2 credits. How much does it cost to break Enigma with Abagnale? 2 credits, sometimes 1 credit. Eli, it's either you pay 3 credits or you pay 4 credits but bypass it. Like a lot of the good ice, it doesn't make that much sense. How much can you bypass a Fairchild 3 for? or you can bypass it for 5 credits, or you can break through it for 2, 4, 7. And admittedly, you save a click on that one, so you can always click for credit at the end of it. Like, I don't know, the math just doesn't add up. This kind of is like spear phishing, where it's another tool where if you're locked out of a server, maybe you can get in, but you can't play spear phishing with Charlatan. So I'm not convinced about this card. It just seems very slow and very expensive for an ability that you're probably better off just putting another copy of your breaker. It'll just probably be cheaper in the long run. So I'm not sure. You could play this in Apex because it is virtual, but I think the worst part about this, it takes 2 clicks. So if you're playing Apex and you do want to go ahead and play your Apocalypse, you can't because you just spent 2 clicks running HQ. And then you don't have any clicks left. So I don't know. It seems pretty difficult to use. This is the last criminal card, and this one's interesting. And this is the part where I slow down a bit because I'm admittedly a little upset. So I was hoping, at least, if you've been watching this channel, you've noticed that the last couple data packs have been rife with templating errors, with copywriting errors, with editing errors. And I was really hoping that wasn't something that we're going to go see in this expansion. I was hoping that was either the first 2 packs of this cycle, or maybe just the Red Sand cycle or something like that. And now that this whole deluxe expansion is out, I can confidently say that's not the case. The same sort of just inattention, to copywriting and to editing and proper formatting exists. It's alive and well in this deluxe expansion, which is entirely a bummer. Admittedly, we got pretty far until we ran into a problem, but on the corp side, it's pretty rough, and it's not good. It's not good. There's still, like, we've seen more problems in the first 2 data packs of this cycle than we have in all the previous 1,000+ cards in Netrunner. And again, there's like 6 or 7 pretty hefty errors in this one product, and that's such a bummer. So FFG, still no idea what's going on. I really recommend you, if you care about this stuff, email FFG, send them a message. Don't be rude, don't be mean, because that's honestly doesn't make sense. And just say, hey, I've noticed editing in this game has gotten pretty crappy. What's up? Because we give a shit. Highly recommend you do that if you haven't already. But let's talk about Maxwell James. So Maxwell James is a connection. Costs 1 credit. He's unique, so there's only 1 Maxwell James, and gives you 1 link. That's pretty good for 1 credit. And you trash Maxwell James, and you can derez a piece of ice protecting a remote server. Use this ability only after a successful run on HQ. So the problem with this card is that we don't know how it works. We have an idea of what it does, but we don't have an idea of when to fire it. So technically, the way this card is written is similar to Sync BRE. By the way, we're on like month 3 of Sync BRE watch, and we don't have an official clarification. Mind you, we do have the UFAC. God bless you, Jacob Morris. But the idea is, it says, the same idea. The runner accesses 1 fewer cards whenever he or she accesses cards. This one should say until the end of the turn. So technically, if you have made it run on HQ at some point in the game, Maxwell James, you can use its ability. And the thing is, like, I'm not sure what this card was meant to say, and we can all speculate, and we will find out eventually. Like, Jacob Morris will put out the unofficial FAQ. He said it was going to come out in a couple days. I was hoping it would come out before I recorded this, but it hasn't, whatever. But the idea is that even if it is clarified in an unofficial FAQ, it is unofficial. So if you go to a tournament, you can, who knows which way the person will rule. I think they're technically not allowed to follow the UFAC for what that's worth. It's not official, right? Anyways. So use this ability only after a successful run on the HQ. Is that this turn? Is that the beginning of the game? Is that immediately after you made a successful run on HQ before you spend another click or paid ability window? Which is not, it could work like that, but that's not something that like exists in Netrunner to date. So we don't know how this works. We honestly have no idea how this works, and that's kind of an issue. But besides that, let's talk a bit about the card. What we think it does. We're just going to assume it's one of them. Yeah, it does matter 100%, but we'll assume it's one of them. All right, global sec. Is it 2 words? Nice, it's 1 word. So this is access to global sec. It's a very uninspiring card that comes in the core set. You pay 1 credit for a resource that gives you 1 link. That is the cheapest link card to date. This also assigned a link is worth 1 credit, and we have the same thing here. This is unique, so you can't have more than 1 on the table, but you're 1 credit for 1 link. So already it's better than this card. This card isn't fantastic, but you're basically already on power level. So let's go up from there, and we have gone up from there. Derez a piece of ice. Interestingly, We might see this for every single faction. I wouldn't be upset, but we started to see these unique connections that have one link, one credit, and have a cool ability on them. I'm totally for that. I think that's awesome. And I think if link becomes more viable or more necessary, in the meta, it's cool that we have options that aren't like just generic and boring as shit as Dyson membership or access to global sec. So I'm glad Maxwell James is kind of fun. So you get to derez a piece of ice. Again, we don't know exactly when you can fire this. Let's just assume it's if you made a run on HQ this turn, so it's similar to emergency shutdown, and you get to derez a piece of ice on a remote server. That's cool. The thing is, if you trash Maxwell James, you no longer have the link, so that kind of is an issue. You could play this in Geist and get some card draw. You can play Tech Trader and get some money out of it. The issue is if you're playing Geist and you need that link to keep all your breakers in the cloud, you might want to consider not using this. But at the end of the day, 1 credit for 1 link. Yeah, that's fine. Very subtle thing about this card. There are very few, in fact, no cards in the game that let you derez a card at any paid ability window. The only actually way that is possible is you can, in theory, if the board state allows you, you can use a Street Peddler to pull out a Muertos gang member. So if you are lucky enough that all this lines up, you can pull out a Street Peddler and pull out a Muertos gang member and make them derez a card. It's the only way. But the idea is this is really big. Because after you approach a piece of ice on a remote server, the corp reses it. You're now encountering it, and now it's your turn to paid ability windows. And this is a paid ability, so you can trash Maxwell James to derez the piece of ice you're currently encountering. And because you're not approaching the piece of the ice, the corp doesn't have the opportunity to re-res that piece of ice, and you've just bypassed the piece of ice on a remote server and derezed it all for 1 credit. That's really good. And that's a very important thing to understand about Maxwell James. There is no other card besides this Muertos nonsense in which you can run a remote server ice, derez the card and bypass it, and the corp can't interact with you at all. That's really strong. That's really good. Admittedly, this is unique, but if you have this on the table, it really pressures remote servers, even if you're not using the link. The idea is that you put this down, and now any remote server run, they pay 6 to res their Fairchild. You derez at 6, you get through it for free. That's so much value for 1 click, 1 credit of installing this bad boy. Yes, you'll probably have to run HQ first, which does limit it, but again, running HQ is a good thing to do, so maybe that's not terrible. But that's a big deal. Maxwell James is surprisingly good, way better than it looks. If this just wasn't a paid ability, if this took a click or something like that, I think it would be pretty terrible, but it's very reasonable. Other best thing about it is a connection. So the Archivist actually did a lot to build, to bring, what's it called, connection decks. Are we going to find it? No, yeah, one more. No, this is the wrong one. Oops. But like I played on the channel a bunch of these decks that were, what were they called, hammer party decks. And the idea is that you play off-campus apartment and you run just like a massive amount of connections. And Maxwell James fits really well in the off-campus apartment, but I think the best thing about it is a connection that gives you a link. So if you play any of the runners that have a link, your Underworld contacts will start printing you money. And Underworld contact gives you, for the low cost of 2 credits, gives you a credit a turn as long as you have 2 link. This helps you get 2 link. It's a good card. Once it's up, your Underworld start ticking, which is also another connection, so that's more card draw. And if you haven't seen the power of prepaid Kate decks, 1 credit per turn is a lot of money. It is definitely a lot of money in this game, and Maxwell James makes it pretty easy to play Underworld Contact in a criminal deck with connections. You can tutor for either of these things with Hostage. I think Maxwell James actually might breathe a lot of life into Underworld Contact decks, or into connection decks in general. And then you have all the other really cool criminal connection stuff. You have things like calling in favors, which is fantastic, and I think there's some legs here, especially if the meta slows down. Admittedly, if you need the 2 link to play Underworld Connection, it's going to be harder to use Maxwell James' ability, but it's good. It's also like those connection decks were pretty slow, so having an ability that lets you like run a remote server, derez a piece of ice, and bypass it basically all in 1 click is worth it. Just because it helps you not get rushed out early game. I think Maxwell James is absolutely fantastic. Big fan of the art. That purple and that pink, that blue looks so good. Really big fan. Again, no idea how this card technically works. Hopefully we'll find out in the next couple of days. Regardless how it works, the worst case scenario, if this says, the worst case is if they say this works, you can only use it like right after you made a successful run on HQ before you do anything else. In that scenario, it will not bypass ice in the way that I've described, but if it is just, you can only use this after you made a run on HQ, it's really good. It's really, really good. All right, that's all the criminal cards. So there's 5 unique or neutral cards. We're going to go through them real quick. We got 3, and then we'll do the other 2 on the shaper. Let's start here. Process automation. 0 to play. It's an event. Gain 2 credits, draw 1 card, 1 influence. This is pretty hot garbage. This is really bad. Yeah, this is really bad. If you heard me talk about this from the last data pack unboxing, this is build script. Don't have a picture of it. That's fine. Actually, no, the art's pretty good. Build a script. Cost 0, influence 1. Again, gain 1 credit and draw 2 cards. So it looks like the way that they designed these cards is you got 3 points worth of value that you can assign on the cards. And this one's 2 and 1 for credit and draw. This one's 1 and 2. If you want to see the other options, you have Diesel, which is a card that is shaper. Costs a lot of influence, says draw 3 cards. This card's really good. If you want to draw cards, this is a pretty good option. This is also the kind of card that you show newer players who have come from Magic the Gathering or Hearthstone and say, oh yeah, you can play this for free. Also, you have 3 more actions, and they generally lose their mind. Really good card. It gives you cards in hand. It's what you want. It's not fantastic, but it's fine. The other end of the spectrum, you have Fall Guy. No, not Fall Guy. What's it called? Easy Mark. Easy Mark. Play from 0, gain 3 credits. If you need money in a pinch, Easy Mark is good. In the middle of the road, we have build script and process automation, which do neither thing particularly well. They also cost influence, and that's the biggest deal, is that Easy Mark and Diesel do not cost influence. Influence in this game has become tighter than ever. I don't think you can spend 3 or 6 influence on this card, which is basically the most vanilla, boring cantrip. Oh, I gained 2 credits, and I also, this card replaced itself. Like, compare that to gain 2 credits and or expose a piece of card if you want to play infiltration. Like, there's... it's not exciting. I don't think it's particularly good. I think I understand why they put 1 influence on this, because they thought if they didn't, everyone would run it. And I don't even think that's true. I can't tell you for sure, but I just don't think it's true. Again, the biggest problem with build script particularly is Deuce's Wild came out, and I got really upset about this in the last review, is that Deuce's Wild was Dan Dargenia's world champion card, and if you do the math here, you can pay this for 2, gain 3 credits, and draw 2 cards. So basically gain 1 credit, draw 2 cards, which is the same as build script. It also costs 1 influence. It gives you a bevy of other choices that you can tack on for the same thing. So why the hell does this exist? And it seems because of just like terrible... Like, just because FFG is like, we told you not to build this card, Dan Dargenio, design something else. No, fuck you. That's so stupid. Come on. Anyways, it's process automation. It's very much like a Fall Guy and Geist. Except a Fall Guy and Geist can change to gain 5 credits with enough tech traders and can stay on the table forever. So you can draw whenever you want. Great. You can play this with Comet, I guess, if you want to spend influence on it. So you can play Comet and now pair process automation with something else. Is that good? I don't know. Compared that with this, you could have just played literally anything. And that's the thing. Do we have it here? Yeah, this is a list of 1 influence cards. And this is the biggest problem with Netrunner. Not a problem, but that's the exciting thing about Netrunner. Is there's, well, it's admittedly a problem. There's too many cards in the card pool. So if you have a deck and it has like, you have 3 influence left and you're like, oh, well, I want something that smooths out my deck and I want something that just makes it run a bit more efficiently. Yeah, you could look at process automation. It replaces itself and gives you 2 credits. It's a pretty boring click, but technically that's true. Technically, yeah, that's a thing. Do people even run that exclusive party in Criminal? Because that's the same idea. And nobody runs that. But... like, these are all the 1 influence cards, and compare the value you can get from some of these cards that you can from process automation. Stim Hack, gain 9 credits, surprisingly you're in a server. Data Cyberfeeder, a credit per turn if you're running, and by the way, you're running. Data Sucker, basically mini Desperado, Mimic, Best Breaker, Yogg, not 1 influence anymore. Like, these cards are really, really good for 1 influence, so it's so hard to compete for space for something that's so generic. This gives you Link, technically, gives you a credit every time they res a piece of ice. That's great. That's great. Scrubber. Like, how much value does Scrubber get you in this game if you put it down turn 1? In a lot of metas, it gets you like 20, 30 credits sometimes. Like, this is absurd. I jump to the end. Deuce's Wild, way better. Just fantastic. Way much better. Peace in Our Time, gain 9 credits. As the card pool gets bigger and bigger, this card gets worse and worse. I don't get it. I don't think it's exciting. Deuce's Wild is the same amount of influence. I think it's just inherently better. Gain 2 credits and draw 1 card for 1 influence will probably never, ever, ever see play unless there's something that like suddenly lets you play all the 0 cost events in your deck or some crazy nonsense. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure. I'm still upset about build script and Deuce's Wild, so what can you do? Excuse me. Officer Frank. 0 to install, unique resource connection. So get up that campus apartment, trash it, pay 1 credit. It's interesting that the credit's there and not an install cost. I think that's kind of wild. The corp trashes 2 cards from HQ at random. That's pretty good. Use this ability only if you suffered meat damage this turn. Okay. Alright, so if you're putting this in your deck and you want this to fire, this can fire either on your turn or the corp's turn. So let's talk about the corp doing meat damage to you. In theory, if you're playing against, and this is largely only Wayland and largely only NBN, if the corp is doing meat damage to you, they're probably either going to kill you on 1 action, or technically a double. They're killing you in a Scorched Earth, so this card will never fire. Or in some cases, they're hitting you with a small amount of meat damage, something like a non-lethal amount of damage, so they're hitting you with a Scorched Earth, and then next turn they'll hit you with another Scorched Earth, or it could be traffic accident, Scorched Earth, stuff like that. So either they're booming you, or they're hitting you twice with meat damage. That's generally how meat damage decks want to kill you. That does get a bit different with some of the cards that come in this pack, and the other, like the corpse side, like Mr. Stone, but I haven't considered that too much. But the idea is if you put Officer Frank in your deck, you have a small chance of disrupting death. Because they play their first meat damage card, and now they start the turn with 6 cards, right? They play their 1 Scorched, and then before they fire the second Scorched, you can fire Officer Frank, and you have a small chance, it's like a 30% chance or something, to clear out the other Scorched Earth. Now that doesn't sound particularly good, because always they could spend their first click just trashing this, because you are tagged if they're scorching you, so I guess you'd have to use this immediately, but you can't use this immediately because they didn't meat damage you. So this is like a pretty shitty meat damage prediction. It's not going to do that at all. So why does it exist? And it's because there is a new archetype in Netrunner that involves punching yourself in the face repeatedly. And it's actually kind of like funny. And it's pretty good, actually. No, I don't know if it's good. I've seen it do work. It's probably not better than anything else that's available, but like, not all people want to play Netrunner to play the best thing, right? So this is Clan Vengeance. Similar idea. When you suffer any amount of damage, place a power counter on Clash Vengeance, and then you can Clan Vengeance. You can trash 1 card from HQ at random for power counters on Clan Vengeance. And again, if the corporation isn't hitting you with meat damage, Clan Vengeance works on any sort of damage. These cards are kind of useless, so you need to hit yourself in the face. There's a lot of good ways to do that. You can just play Mad Dash or Mad Daz. You can play Mad Dash just on any server, and yeah, you take a meat damage, but you're basically saying Mad Dash, make a run, so you can check a remote server, you can check HQ and R&D. Maybe it fires, maybe it doesn't. If it doesn't fire, yeah, you do lose a card from hand, but now you can pay a credit to trash 2 cards from HQ at random. And also get counters on your Clan Vengeance. That can be good. Trashing 2 cards at random from HQ is really good for 1 credit, let alone 1 click for installing this, because it's like you ran HQ, like you accessed cards, like you trashed them, not paying their trash costs if they were trashable, or paying their trash costs if they were trashable. Like, that's fantastic. You're also doing this on your turn, so you can, in theory, play Officer Frank, Mad Dash their pad campaign, trash it, fire Officer Frank, run archives, maybe steal some agendas, and they can't react to it if they don't have Jackson on the table. Also, trashing 2 cards is really good because it puts the corporation at 3 cards in hand, so you can legwork in and access everything. There's a bunch of other ways to hit yourself. There's all the brain damage stuff like stim hack and all that. Like, there's honestly not it's not that hard to harm yourself if you want to do the sort of self-harm Netrunner thing. Oh, that sounds terrible. But that's the idea, is that this archetype is slowly getting legs, and I have no doubt we're going to see more clan stuff, like with Clan Vengeance and in the Mars cycle, in which like hitting yourself is not going to be unreasonable. And that's an interesting, because that's a part of Netrunner we haven't explored. I'm not sure if this archetype is actually going to pick up, but it's probably fun to play, and trashing cards from HQ at random is really, really good. And this one you can also use on the corpse turn. Oh no, you can't. They have to meat damage you. Yeah, I don't know. You get double value if you have both these on the table. Like, that's a lot. You get one of these on the table, play an Officer Frank, Mad Dash, trash 3 cards. Yeah, okay. That's fun. It's fun. All right, last card we're going to talk about in this pack. And again, gotta slow down here because, oh boy, FFG, what have you done? Biomodeled? I don't know how to spell this. No, I'm just going to write network. So you might have seen this card before or been like, oh, wait a second, I recognize this art. And it's true, it's because you do. These look eerily similar. Oh, wait a second, it's the same art. How did this happen? I don't know. How did this pass quality control? Who knows? We'd have no idea. Yeah, so this happened. They printed the same piece of art on two pieces of cards. Never happened before. Unprecedented. I don't know if this has happened before in other collectible card games or LCGs or CCGs or what have you. If this has actually happened before, we have seen goofs on art. Oh, this one's actually cropped slightly different. Oh, look at that. But we have seen goofs on other pieces of art so far. This one's actually really fun and subtle. I don't know if you've noticed this, but technically, dedicated response team is upside down. And you've probably seen this art and been like, whoa, they're flying on the bottom of a skyscraper. This one actually is rotated improperly. I think that's the worst goof up that we've had on an FFG piece of art. But here they went and they printed the same piece of art on two cards. You also notice they have two different artists. I don't remember exactly whose art this is. You can go on internet and see what these artists, what their style looks like, and you can kind of guess who is who. So I'm not sure which one's the original and which one's not. Hilariously enough, this comment here on oh, where is it? Oh, it was here. Oh no, where was it? Maybe it was on Reddit, but somebody made a post about how they find it absolutely hilarious how this card, Biometric Spoofing, is talking about they know how lazy sysops would work just as hard to figure it out. It's talking about lazy sysops, and this one's talking about creating a replica of yourself and projecting it into the network. And like thematically, the fact that like bad, lazy FFG quality control has made a copy of a sysop, it's like just brilliant. It's so on point. It's absolutely hilarious. But yeah, can't say I'm happy about this. This is really crappy, and I really, you like FFG, you need to apologize to the artist that probably drew something really cool for one of these cards, had their art attached to someone else's stuff. It's not bad art, mind you. Like, I think this is great, but and then their art didn't get published. Like, that's just so shitty. That's so shitty. Anyways. And this is not going to like cheer you up, but let's talk about the card. It's cost 2 credits. It's called Biometric Spoofing. It's a resource, no influence, and it just says trash to prevent 2 damage. Mind you, bio model says trash prevent all but 1 damage. So they're very similar cards. They have to start with the same letters. So like you could kind of see how there was a clerical error somewhere, but you would also assume that this would get caught at some point in the process. Right? Like this took us 1 second to be like, wait a second. I know this card. All right. So you're putting this down for 2 credits and you're preventing 2 damage. So you're firstly, if you're putting this in your deck, you're hoping the corp is running damage, which not all of them are. HB might be running brain damage. Wayland might be running meat damage. Jinteki's almost definitely running net damage. NBN, maybe they're trying to meat damage you. Probably not anymore. But that's the thing, is this card does nothing besides prevent damage. It also prevents all sorts of damage. That's totally worth saying. So it's a card that prevents 2 brain damage. That's pretty good, actually, in terms of like that doesn't exist. I don't think it's good though. We talked about this many times ago. If you're gonna print a card that's super narrow in what it does, it has like don't is what I'm trying to say. Like these sort of cards are so boring. If you put them in your deck, it's because you're going to cause damage to yourself. And just like we talked about in Officer Frank, there are now decks that want to do damage to themselves. But if you prevent the damage of biometric spoofing, that's not going to fire because you actually have to suffer the damage. So like these don't work together. So this is probably like either, and also for what it's worth, all the cards like Stim Hack and all that said the damage can't be prevented. So this seems like it's just a defensive card. Compare that to Plastic Carapace, and Plastic Carapace is limited in what it can do. It's a super boring card. I don't think it's fantastic design, but it's very good at what it does. You put this down for 3, it's hardware, so it's hard to trash, because if they're trying to kill you with meat damage, just trash this first. Yeah, and then it gives you counters that you can choose when to use on a meat damage by damage basis to prevent up to 4 meat damage. It's absolutely a stunningly good card at preventing meat damage. This will cycle out of the meta. Is this a replacement? I hope to hell not. I don't know. Like if this card even does something like, oh, trash, prevent 2 damage, or look at the top 2 cards of R&D, or prevent 2 damage, expose 2 cards, like reveal 2 cards from HQ. Like if this just does something where it would be like mildly playable in any matchup in which prevent 2 damage didn't matter, which is the majority of them. I bring this up every time. Sports Hopper. This is a really good damage protection card. It doesn't prevent you from losing cards, but it gives you 1 link. You can always pop this to draw cards, which prevents you from dying. And compare that to this, which you put this on the table for 2 credits. It's boring. It's not fun. Interesting choices with this. Very limited. It's just, do I want to prevent this damage or the next one? And it's relatively expensive for what it does. I think this is terrible. It's not a good card. It's not exciting. It just seems to be pack filler. Maybe this is necessary in like the basis of the campaign. That's likely why it exists, right? Because some factions, there, I think the Seasource Scorch. I don't know if this is a spoiler, but like the Wayland deck, I think has access. The recommended Wayland deck. This is not a spoiler. The recommended Wayland deck has meat damage in it, and there's no Plascrete. So this actually needs to exist within the confines of the game if you're playing the recommended decks. So maybe that's why it exists. But all in all, I don't get it. It's a trash ability, so play it in Geist. No, I don't think you need to. That's it. That's the end of this. That's all the criminal cards. Sorry to end on such a sour note, because if you remember the way we were talking at the beginning of this pack, I think there's some really cool stuff in here, some really interesting designs. I'm so excited to play Steve Cambridge. I think that's a really cool ability to rebirth into him, to make some interesting decisions. This is interesting decisions. This isn't that. That's really cool. Polyhistor is interesting. We got some good breakers. Abagnale is great. I think Mammon's very interesting. Maxwell, very powerful card. And then Officer Frank, I think, is actually very interesting for that archetype. But that's basically all we got working with here. That's the criminal side. And then we have an equal amount of Shaper sides coming up. So that's going to be coming up tomorrow. Thanks so much for watching. Let me know what you think. There's like a lot of cards, so it's kind of hard to process all of this. And I'm going to definitely miss some of the more interesting and nuanced interactions with the rest of the card pool. So let me know what kind of decks you're excited to play. As much as possible, please try not to talk about campaign spoilers in the comments below, because people do read those. And let alone, I haven't played the campaign yet, but I think people don't want that spoiled. So do be mindful about that. Let everyone have their own experience. Otherwise, thanks so much for watching. Stay tuned. We'll have the Shaper side up tomorrow. Ciao.